I've read that in doing research, I think it was maybe the Humphrey Wikipedia page, that Humphrey got
I
his
edited
name.
a lot of that.
I love that. Apparently, this is for the home fries, I guess. I don't know if most people know this or if it's super public knowledge. I just found it really interesting. Humphrey got its name from Matt Atwood's grandfather's boat, if I'm correct.
Yep, that is correct. When we were kind of coming up with names, we're just throwing out whatever we can, whatever musical a cappella pun we could think of. Nothing really resonated with us. And Matt had suggested that one, and we kind of said, why that? He said, I don't know, it kind of sounds like it could work. And also, my grandpa's boat is named Humphrey. And he's always told me if I ever wanted to do something, he'd be happy to support me. So maybe he would give us some money. And he did.
I love that. That is so fascinating, actually. That is.
He loaned us a lot of money. His grandpa's like I said, he's a big real estate family business. His grandpa's pretty well off. So he invested thousands of dollars in us early on to make a CD, to buy equipment, to buy a big van and things like that. And we paid him back. It was loans, it wasn't free. But the fact that we even had access to that was huge. And one of the reasons was because he was very flattered that we had named the band after his boat.
I love that. That is actually the perfect segue into a question that I have for you about the music industry.
Okay.
You've been doing this for a while. You started Home Free in 2001, but then you've also been doing this even before Home Free. Yeah. You've seen, which is I think a really cool aspect of that you've had the opportunity. You've seen a lot of changes in the music industry, from early cassettes to CDs to buying music to when we used to put music on ringtones, and then to streaming and stuff. And I'm curious, just how has it been a conscious thought or has it been just subconsciously you adjusting to the music industry?
Certainly some of both. Yeah, when I started, so like my first paid gig I ever did when I was 16 years old. So this would have been back in 96-ish, give or take. That was when high school. My mom had hired me to sing at a wedding, and I got paid for it. Like, this is great. And we built up from there. And then 2001, we started Home Free, and it was certainly different. Streaming wasn't a thing, obviously. Even iTunes wasn't a thing. Napster was the thing back then. You still bought CDs like crazy. I'm going to say that's the biggest difference is how the music is distributed. In the every year that I've seen, even from when I left the band and did my solo thing in 2016, CD sales were still a thing. Mm-hmm. Now, very little. It's almost to the point it's not worth making them, at least for me. It still is, but when you make a CD order, the companies are actually, I think, a little bit too legacy on this themselves, but they do it as a minimum generally with 1,000 CDs. And you just don't need 1,000 CDs unless you're big enough to even justify that. But then that scale just changes. So if I could do an order of 300 CDs and had that be cost efficient, that's what I would do. Don't need 1,000 because you just don't sell enough. But my first couple of CDs releases I absolutely needed 1,000. Mm-hmm. So that's just a huge change to try to navigate that. And also then trying to where your revenue sources come in from is so much different. I was lucky pre-COVID that I was already not doing much live performance in the first place. So that made that transition into the pandemic not as rough for me as with some others. But so again, CD sales used to be such a big part of what you would do as a musician, promoting that and selling them out of your van at the end of the concert kind of thing. And it's just not a thing anymore. So now you have
that's Patreon. Such a classic music scene, man. Oh, right? I can literally picture that.
Here's a little story for you. When we did, there's a concert touring service that Home Free did back in 8, 9, 10, 11. And it was huge for us. It was called the Allied Concert Series. And we toured around the Midwest at all these small communities where they would subscribe to the series, and then the series would bring in 4 or 5 acts for the year for this small town. And it was great experience for us. So we really honed our show during that because we were doing 5 shows a week for 6 weeks. Just every night. It got so much better. And we would sell a good amount of merchandise, like maybe $700 or $800 a night because people loved our show and wanted to buy the CDs. And then we'd sign them and did a whole thing with that. And I did that with a group I had started recently called 7th Ave. When I left Home Free, I started out with my sister. And we did that Allied run a couple years ago, and we would average $150 a night in CD sales. Now, maybe some of that was because Home Free was just that good, but also just people didn't want to buy them anymore.
Yeah.
Why? A lot of cars don't even have CDs anymore. So what do you do? So that's the biggest change, is having to navigate how the income comes in differently, because now it's what's your streaming revenue going to be like? What's your ad revenue on YouTube videos? What's your Patreon supports?
Yeah.
And then some of the private gigs you can do for your fans, like those personal experiences are valuable. But I do that sort of thing too occasionally, where you get hired to come in and sing in the living room, those kind of concerts. And those kind of experiences have more value. Not that they didn't before, but that's something you do now as a music lover. So those are some of the biggest changes that I felt. And of course, democratization of the industry, where it's not controlled by the record labels anymore.